Hello, everybody. Welcome to Unveiled and our live stream Q&A with filmmaker Darcy Weir and UFO researcher Philip Mantle. Gentlemen, how are you?
Good evening.
Great. Happy to be here. How's it going, everyone?
Very good. Pleasure to speak with you both. So we just premiered a portion of your docu-series Pascagoula 73, Darcy. And we're here to open the floor to any viewers who have questions about that case, about Philip and his background. So welcome to everybody. Please leave your questions in the comments and we'll get to them as soon as we can. As a brief introduction, Philip, this film really introduces you and your backstory. What did you think was the most important part of it to get right when introducing you to people?
Yeah, and I think it's important to make people remember that not everything happens in the United States when it comes to the UFO subject. And there are many fascinating cases here in the UK as well, and elsewhere in the world, of course. And there are many UFO investigators like myself, again, not just in the UK, but in different parts of the world, that don't necessarily hit the headlines, but they've been at it for a number of years. So just in case, people weren't aware of who I was, my background, where I come from, why I have this strange accent from across the Atlantic, Darcy thought it would be a good idea to cover that. And we did. And then, away we went, so to speak.
Absolutely. You mentioned that you got into ufology when your mother sent you a bunch of books. If you had to give one of those books that got you into ufology to a complete skeptic, which one would you choose?
Well, I think, Hynek's book was one of those paperbacks that I read. For those who haven't watched the show, I was working in what was then West Germany. This is over the winter of 1978-79. I couldn't speak the language, so I got a little bit of an interest in the subject. So I rang my mum. I said, "Can you send me some books, Mum?" So she sent me a box of books. Where she got them from, I don't know. Probably the local market, all on UFOs. So after work on an evening, I would sit and read them. So when I got back home the following year, I had a little bit more knowledge. Was still as naive as anything, and I don't pretend to have become an expert overnight, but that spurred me on, and thanks to my mum. Yeah, and that was it.
It's a great story. For Darcy, you had Philip's entire career to draw from. Why did you choose to focus on the alien autopsy and the Alan Godfrey cases to demonstrate his introduction?
Well, I think the important thing with the history of ufology, experiencers, abductions, all that stuff is the fact that not all of it is true. Like, we have to acknowledge that some things in this sphere, in this sort of like community, are just straight up hoaxes. And they're used to garner attention, distraction, entertainment, money, all of the above, right? And Philip's one of these people that's been around for so long, interacting with the community, that he's brushed up with that. And I thought it was really interesting to sort of see that arc in his story, because there are known people out there in the community that spread falsehoods to this day, and they never turn back on the falsehoods. They keep propagating them. And Philip's not like that. He corrected that once he realized that he was involved in something that was not real. He, did lectures and published studies on it and made it known to the world. And I think something we were talking about even just before we went live is that there's actually a documentary in the UK being shot about that right now, the alien autopsy story, and how it was a hoax. So, it's important that we know that there's some truths, and then there's some hoaxes and some distractions. And I'm all about that. I want to show everything.
Yeah, let's dig into that alien autopsy saga a little bit. Philip, can you take us back to that time? What was the one piece of evidence or the one moment when you became certain that it was a hoax?
Yeah, it was not that long after the film had been released on television and seen around the world, because then everyone could view it. I'd already seen it behind the scenes. There is actually more film that's never been released. There is another complete autopsy. Same creature, same location, although the creature isn't damaged. It's got no hole in the leg like the other one has. And it's a slightly different medical procedure. So I have an advantage of that. But people could see it, they could study it. There was a special effects company in the United States. They took their time and they studied the alien autopsy film, second by second. And what they did, they produced a list of things that were wrong. Now, if you just run the film at normal speed, you will never probably notice any of these things. So they told you when, what time to look, and this is what you're looking at. And none of them were massive, great, oh my God, why didn't I see that? These were all little things. But when you added all those little things up, you realize there's something wrong here, something desperately wrong. And so what I did, the alien autopsy film and my research into became personal, because when it first came out, there were idiots accusing me of all kinds of things. For example, my wife and I were having an extension built on our house. And it was, well, where's Mantle got his money from? Well, it's got nothing to do with them anyway. They were right. I didn't have the money, but my wife did. She had a property of her own, which we'd sold. We had a young family, so we wanted a bigger house. And I was called all kinds of stuff. So it became personal. And I was determined to get to the bottom of it. Again, rather naively, some people might say, but once it went out on television, I remember it went on TV around the world, the US being the biggest coverage of it on Fox. I thought, right, I'll sit back now and the info will come in at some point or another. But nothing. It was literally the tumbleweed effect, not anything. So I had to make a decision what to do, but I was determined to get to the bottom of it. And I remember having lunch with Ray Santilli. He's the guy that promoted it and sold it in London. And I stared him in the eyes and I said, I'll get to the bottom of this, Ray, at some point. And he just shrugged his shoulders and, said, okay. Little did I know it would take many years to get to the bottom of it. So there was no instant, that's it, one of the doctors has got a digital watch on or anything like that. It was a slow, right, we'll hack away at it a little bit at a time and slowly but surely, right, prove that bit to be fake, prove that bit. And in the end, we found the man who was behind it all, who is Spiros Malaris, of course. And that was it. It took a long time, but I was determined. I used to say to myself, I'm going to shake the alien autopsy tree and see if anything falls out. Most of the time, nothing did. Darcy mentioned that I'd put an article recently on Facebook. It's an old article from 2002 in a magazine just called UFO Magazine. This was a newsstand publication. And my story is the cover feature. And a gentleman contacted me. He'd seen the magazine and he was called Simon. And he says, I didn't know anybody was still interested in this thing. I said, yeah, but it's all online now, mostly. And he said, my friend's the guy that made the dummies for it. Now that got my attention. So he gave me his phone number. I spoke to him. I'm cutting a long story short. We met, him and a colleague of mine. And he said, my pal wants to go public if there's interest. He wants to spill the beans. So I put him in touch with a TV producer. I won't mention any names. He spoke to him. They were well down the path of agreeing to do a documentary. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, it was cancelled. The sculptor was a guy called John Humphreys. John had signed up to make the dummies for a movie version of the Alien Autopsy. It's called Alien Autopsy. Stars two British TV personalities known as Ant and Dec, two lovely guys. So that was the end of that. I even got in touch with the film production company that were making the movie. And I asked them. And I said, who's doing your special effects? This is on email. And they said, John Humphreys. He's the guy that made the dummies for Ancient Antilles. So I said, thank you very much. That's confirmed it. But one thing that John Humphreys, the sculptor, did say before he signed off and wouldn't speak to us anymore, he says, it's Spiros you need to speak to. Who the hell was Spiros? And that was it. So it took a while longer, and then a colleague of mine in 2006, a chap called Russell Callahan, was doing his own little magazine, and he got a phone call from a guy. And this guy says, I'm the guy who made the Alien Autopsy film. I made it, I designed it, etc. And he said, Russell said, well, it's not me you need to speak to, it's Philip. So Russ told me, he said, I've just had this guy on the phone. It's, what's his name? Spiros Malaris. Hellfire. How many people in the UK are called Spiros? You know? So I spoke to him, and as I'm speaking to Spiros, all the pieces of the puzzle that I didn't have were being put into place as he's talking away. And the guy can talk. You know, he's a lovely fella. I then went to his home in London sometime later. And so not only could he tell the story, he could show me what he'd done. He had his diaries from the time back in the early 90s. He had faxes from Kodak. He had piles of files with research papers in. He was going to do even more than they did. He wanted to build a flying saucer crash, you know, and film it. And he had one file, all of American military vehicles. And I said, well, why have you got that? He said, well, when we were going to build the crash, I was going to build a fake back end of a fake American military vehicle. And I was going to use one of these registration numbers. So if you check that up in some directory somewhere, it will be there, you know, but they run out of time and money for that. So not only could he tell the story, he could prove it. And he's since written his own book, and it's all there for anybody who wants to see it as well. So there you go. So it got personal. And of course, the idiot who called me Ray Santilli's accomplice has never got in touch. I've never seen him again, you know, but I just thought it was important because it is easy to call something a hoax. And there's nothing wrong with that, of course. But sometimes when it's something of this magnitude, and remember this went around the world, I think you got to prove it. So I stuck with it and we got there.
These days, people are very skeptical of the things that they see circulating online. I guess at the time of the Alien Autopsy film, it was a lot more difficult to fake things. Do you think that's why they were able to fool so many people for so long? What do you think the reason was for that?
No, I don't think it was any more difficult to fake things. I mean, the internet was in its infancy in those days. We're talking 1995. It was the first kind of UFO battle online. And we're talking about the green screen and things like that. And there was no Google, you know, no social media. But we also have to keep bringing the Alien Autopsy film up because we have to remember that there are new people joining the subject, you know, and they're probably not aware of what's been done in the past. So sometimes you have to go around in circles just to say, look, this is. But as Darcy said, there's some people know this damn films are fake, but they still use it to promote whatever, you know. And when you get a lot of newspaper articles, a still from the Alien Autopsy film with the creature lying on a slab is now the go-to photograph for the aliens at Roswell. Mm-hmm. It's amazing how many times there'll be an article and that'll be stuck in it somewhere, you know.
Yeah.
So, But it is important, as Darcy pointed out, that the fakes and the hoaxes have to be exposed.
I'm
Sorry,
curious. Sorry to cut you off there, Philip. So Spiros Malaris was a magician by professional trade?
Yeah, Spiros initially trained as a mechanic. He's from a Greek family, so his parents said, "You've got to learn a trade, son." You know, the old-fashioned kind of thing. You've got to learn it. So he was a mechanic, but as a young fella, he had two interests. One was filmmaking, so he literally played around with 16mm film, making his own little films in a shed, and magic. So he became a magician, and when I met him in 1990, whatever, when I met him, he also had his own film studio, which he licensed out to whoever wanted to rent it, and it was very successful. And he'd made a number of films down the years. And that's how he met Ray Santilli, because Spiros and his crew were like a crew for hire. And there is I don't know if you call it a convention, but there's a thing in Cannes in France every year. It's called, is it MIPCON? And it's the
Television
film festival television. And he was going to that. He'd been hired, but he had some spare time. So he got a directory, a trade directory, and he faxed a number of people that were within a certain radius of where he was based. One of those happened to be Ray Santilli's company. And he met Ray out in Cannes, and he told him this crazy story. Ray had already got a piece of film that was made by Keith Bateman. It's called the tent footage. And Ray used that as bait. So afterwards, when they get home, Spiros goes to Ray's office, sees this tent footage and says, well, that's fake. That's never seen 16mm film. It's been shot on video. So Ray would give him the, whoa, I paid a lot of money for this. So Spiros was driving home, and I think the sort of magician in him kicked in. And he thought, well, if he wants some alien autopsy film, we can make him some. I have a friend who's a Royal Academy trained sculptor who has done some TV and film work as well. So that's where the idea came from. And they got a budget and they made it. But according to Spiros, and I believe him, the original idea was to let the film out. And then about 6-9 months later, do the unveil, da-da, we're the guys that made it. Aren't we clever? Hoping that they would then get some more work. John Humphreys was a very talented artist, sculptor, still is. Might put him in the spotlight, get him some more work. He's a family man. But Ray kept saying, no, I haven't made my money yet, So they just left it. And people find it hard to believe that Spiros left it for a number of years. Then there was a personal dispute between them. And Spiros said, enough's enough. It's time we tell. So he started contacting people to tell the story. One of those happened to be my pal Russell. And the rest, as they say, was history.
After being involved in such a big con, Philip, how did that shape your approach to investigations moving forward from that point?
Well, it reminded and reinforced that, be careful, beware, because the technology today is much better than it was back then. I mean, it's not that long ago. I think there was an app that you could, on your phone, you could put a flying saucer in your photograph just on an app, and it would look quite convincing. So when it comes to film, moving image, or even still photographs, what we used to do was look at them with an open mind. But now, me personally, if I get anything like that, I automatically have my guard up and class it as fake until proven otherwise. And so, lesson learned. But there you go. But of course, the story was out there, how it was faked. But then it didn't stop others being taken in with other stories, and that bothered me, because they should have known better. And the Roswell slides fiasco was one. These fake mummies from God knows where, But that's the way it is. I can't do anything about that.
Let's pivot to a case that you actually do find credible. So Alan Godfrey is a part of this docu-series as well. A police officer on duty, he sees a diamond-shaped craft. What makes his testimony different and compelling compared to others?
Yeah, Alan was in a town called Todmorden in late 1980. And he was in a patrol car. We used to call them panda cars, little things. And he was on night shift. And all night, Alan had been looking for some cows that had supposedly escaped. And he couldn't find them. So he was finishing his shift in the morning. He drove down into the town centre. He spoke to a patrolman, policeman on foot. And he thought, I'll have one last sweep for these cows, and then it's I'm finished. He's driving through the main road through the town, and he's just about to turn off to go to the police station. And in the distance, there is a large mill. It was still working then. And he sees a light. And he thinks, what's that? So he carries on up the road, and it turns out that there's this large diamond-shaped object literally blocking the road in front of him. He tries to use his radio to speak to the police station. He couldn't get through. So he takes up his clipboard and his pen, and the car is stationary, and he draws this thing. The next thing he knows is several hundred yards down the road, now driving the patrol car. No memory of starting it again. He turned around, this thing had gone, but it had been raining during the night. And when he pulled up to where this object was, the tarmac in the road was dry. Now, when he got back to the police station, it was late. And he also, when he was getting changed, he had a huge split on his police boot and a burn mark on the instep of his ankle. That was not there the night before. So Alan officially reported this incident. The following day, they made him write a report, and he did. And that was the end of it, as far as he was concerned. He then met up at some point with some local UFO investigators. There'd been a few other sightings out on the moors above Todmorden. There's large hills around the area. And eventually, these UFO researchers employed two professional psychologists to put Alan under hypnotic regression, which they did, I think, 3 times. They filmed it, and they told Alan he wouldn't remember it. And then at the end of it, they sat Alan down and showed him the video. And what you see is Alan, lying on the bed. He talks about this light. He throws his hands up. The light. He sees a humanoid being that is pretty much like you or me. It's a little man with a beard, a white skull cap and a white gown, called Joseph. He then recoils, does Alan. Ugh. And there's some other creatures down below, smaller ones. He said they're shaped like the old-fashioned light bulbs. And out of the blue, he says there's a black dog.
Yeah, that's the weirdest part. In your opinion, does the black dog make it more or less credible? Because it's something so strange that you don't typically hear of.
Well, exactly. For me, the black dog is known throughout folklore. And it's known for a number of other things. For example, everybody knows our wartime leader, Winston Churchill. Churchill used to suffer from depression. He called it the black dog. We had a lot of UFO sightings in North Yorkshire, in the UK, and I remember we got a phone call from a guy up there, and he said, "I've seen these lights. I live in this village." So myself and a colleague decided we'd make an appointment. We'll go and interview him. When we got there, it wasn't a village. It was like 6 houses. No numbers on the doors or anything like that. So we'd no idea where we're going. So we just knocked on the first door. So you tell us where Mr. whatever his name was. And I remember this lady, she looked at us and she says, "Have you come about the ghost dog?" So the villagers saw these two lights float down the village, and to them they were the eyes of this ghost dog. It's like the Hound of the Baskervilles in Sherlock Holmes. So the black dog is known throughout folklore in a number of different ways. So to me, that added to the story because it is so bizarre. Alan knew nothing about folklore. Alan was a very down-to-earth police officer with commendations, already for his work. He's the type of officer who would, in those days, would rather give you a telling off than give you a parking ticket or a speeding fine, And in fairness to Alan, he says, "Look, Philip, I saw that thing on the road. If I've had a brick, I could have hit it and it would have gone clunk. As for the hypnosis," he says, "you make of it what you will. I don't remember that. That's hypnosis. But what I do remember," and Alan, what is interesting, just a little aside issue. You probably know the Travis Walton movie Fire in the Sky.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the production company involved in that actually came to see Alan Godfrey. So it was between the Alan Godfrey story and the Travis Walton story. At that time, there wasn't enough in Alan's story to make it into a movie. So Fire in the Sky got the green light instead. Alan has since written his own book, and it reveals a lot more of how he was badly treated by the police force. They forced him out, etc., etc. So Alan did have a lot to lose, and he lost it, despite speaking to his boss, the chief constable, and saying, "Am I okay to go and speak about this on television, etc.?" Yes. What, in uniform? Yeah, he got permission, but they used that to get rid of him. So he had a lot to lose, and unfortunately, he lost it.
From your experience as an investigator, is this common, this type of personal ruin that comes along with abduction stories from witnesses? Have you witnessed this before?
No, not really. It's probably the only one that I'm aware of, because it was a different time. We're going back to the 1980s. It's a time when we had Margaret Thatcher as our prime minister. She was different to any prime minister we'd had before or since. So it was a different atmosphere, a different time. I interviewed many abductees here in the UK, and none of them had been treated like that by their, employer, so to speak. And some of them even thought it was an enhancing experience. Others didn't, of course. There was a mixed view on what, how the experience had affected people. But Alan, to this day, I spoke to a film writer and director just a couple of years back. He was part of the original crew, went to see Alan Godfrey. Once Alan's book came out, he then said, "Right, we now have enough to make it into a full-blown movie." And he was writing a script about it then. So whether they've ever got anywhere or not, I don't know. I hope they do. I hope they do.
In the comments, Sir Gasbo says, "MI5 do oversight of the British police system and they will pull rank if it's in their favor." Do you believe that to be true, Philip?
No, never came across that anywhere. I've been into a number of police stations down the years. I went to one family who lived out in the wilds a little bit. They'd seen something. The kids were there. They made drawings of it. They reported it to the police. The police came out, interviewed them, took the drawings. I went to the police station unannounced, just walked in, said, "I'm doing this, this is what I'm involved in." "Oh yeah. Have you got the drawings?" "Oh yeah." They actually had the drawings hanging from bits of string in their office. So they'd obviously had a bit of fun with it, and they gave me them, no problem. When I first began this, I was part of the Yorkshire UFO Society, and one of our members was a police sergeant called Tony Dodd. Tony had his own sighting. He went on to photograph these objects that he'd been seen twice. And, Tony had no problem speaking to people or telling people what had happened. And he got well known in his local area. So a lot of the local people would report things directly to him and then from Tony to us. So I've never come across that anywhere.
Philip, Sorry.
Go ahead. No, I had a question for you, Darcy. I also wanted to just remind our viewers that if they have any questions, please leave them in the comments for us. But go ahead.
Yeah, no, we were talking about Spiros Malaris before. He's a magician involved with the alien autopsy case. And, speaking of magicians, have you ever heard of Chris Ramsey? He now has a UFO show, Area 52 Investigations.
I've heard the name, yeah.
So he published the other day the famous Ronnie Hill alien photo. What do you think of that, Philip?
Ronnie Hill.
Yeah.
Can we find a picture of that to throw up on screen?
The photo almost looks like, that alien creature over your left shoulder there. But yeah, okay, you're not familiar with it. I just thought you might.
I've got a link. Maybe we can throw it up on screen here in a second.
Yeah, what I do, Darcy, is and this might upset some of your listeners, but I'm not convinced that we're actually being visited by aliens.
Really?
Yeah. I have my own thoughts on what I emphasize may lie behind the UFO phenomena. So if we're not being visited by aliens, yes, I've seen that. Yes, that's a little dull. Yeah, that's a little dull. It's a dull. So therefore, if we're not being visited by aliens, therefore these photographs are fake. All of them. That's the way I look at it. That's a dull.
Yeah, I figured it was something fake. It's a funny thing. I mean, you're always going to get that, right? Like throughout the decades.
Well, I mean, there is a photograph here in again, I live in the county of West Yorkshire, and our song, the song of West Yorkshire, is called On Ilkley Moor Bar Tat. It means on Ilkley Moor without your hat. And there is a place called Ilkley Moor. It's a very popular tourist place with some rocks. Out on the moor, it's a bigger part of what's called Romballs Moor. There is the swastika stone. So it's an ancient stone with a swastika carved into it. There is a place called White Wells where the fairies were seen. Now, we have a photograph from a local guy who was walking up past White Wells, who claims he saw this little green man up ahead of him. So he took a photograph of it. He then chased it up the hill, and it went into a hollow, and there was a flying saucer there, and off it went. And we have the photograph. It's a bit grainy, but it's passed all the tests. Whatever that thing is, it is there and in the landscape. It's not been added after. It's not been enhanced because there was no digital technology when this thing was photographed. I've never had a chance to speak to the photographer, but some of my colleagues have. He was supposedly an ex-police officer, but that doesn't matter for the time being. The fact is that thing is there and in the landscape. And it's the Ilkley Moor entity, as it's known. So there are photographs you can't explain, but it could be a model, it could be a blow-up thing, it could be a whole host of things, but it is there and in the landscape. But it's the right size, It's not a little thing like we just showed us, a little doll. There you go. So there are things that I can't explain. I'll easily admit that.
That's fair. Darcy, from a filmmaker's perspective, I'm curious, what do you look for when you're searching for a compelling story to tell in your films?
Yeah, I think what helps in illustrating these stories is a lot of archival. So whether that's tons of testimony that's from the past, pictures, video, like all that sort of stuff combined works really well in a documentary. I mean, if you're ever pitching these to networks like, television networks or Amazon or Tubi or these platforms that I can get my films on, they want to usually know if there's, a deep story. And I think with the Pascagoula 73 story that I did with Philip, there's so much there, right? There's Philip's backstory, which not a lot of people have like really dove into. Philip, you could probably publish about 4 books about that. You know, how he got into this from a young lad to now, and how, again, his arc in what his beliefs were changed over time. Then you've also got the Pascagoula incident itself, where you have dozens of witnesses. So, you know, I remember when I started looking into this story back when I was like 20 years ago. I had heard about these guys in the deep south of the United States fishing, and an alien craft just comes, picks them up, and takes them away. And I had always kept in the back of my head, wow, I'd love to know more about that story. And it just came to me one day. I was sitting here in my office, and Philip Mantle wrote me an email and said, hey, would you ever be interested in doing a documentary on these guys? I've done some really good research on it. And Philip and I started speaking, and I did an interview initially with him. I really liked him. He's got a great personality. He can make you laugh about half the time about things that are going on in the UFO phenomenon. And I said, sure. So I'm going to be over in the UK, and I'll interview you, and we'll make this into a story. And then he just started providing me with all this archival, you know, the backstory on Calvin Parker, Charlie Hickson, these new witnesses that have come forward since then, and their life stories and everything kind of in between. And then there's these new abductees, Maria and Jerry Blair, that said they were on the other side of the river that night, and this was their story. So it just all kind of came together. There was so much to cover. And I think, you know, if you look at stuff that's published every day, you know, there can be certain things that can be put together. You know, let's talk about like the Bugosphere or Nazca mummies, right? If you look into it, there's lots of things you could debunk those with, because there's not a huge history of it. It's all new and it's fantastical. But with cases like Pascagoula 73 and some of these older cases, you can really dive in and you can see this breadth of research that's been done to point to something actually happening.
I should mention that the 30-minute video that we premiered on Unveiled is just one segment of your larger docu-series, which everybody can check out with the links in the descriptions for this video. So please do that once we're through with this. Philip, what makes the Pascagoula case so compelling to you?
Well, if you were to sit down and think to yourself, what would be the perfect case? If I could, you know, make one up and it'd come my way, what would it be? Well, this is it. And it's one I can't explain. I don't have an explanation for it, as hard as I've tried. It pretty much has everything. Not quite, but pretty much has everything. From the 2 initial witnesses, Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker, their interviews at Jackson County Sheriff's Department that night. I mean, within a couple of hours, they were being interviewed in the open and recorded secretly. And I have those tape recordings. The following day, they were at Keesler Air Force Base and they were interviewed. And I have a transcript of the interview there. And on we go. And the case originally started with just Charlie and Calvin. You know, and if you look in the newspapers or the TV at the time, there were a couple of other witnesses. There was a gentleman called Mr. Booth. He was a local guy. He knew the date and time because he was watching his favorite TV show at the time, and it was Kung Fu with David Carradine. Seen it myself, you know. Yeah, exactly. So he went for, I think that he went to let the dog out or whatever, and this damn thing's in the sky above his house. So there were a couple of witnesses there at the time. But once Calvin Parker stepped forward and told his story in full for the first time, it just seemed to hit the right note. Calvin did some local media first, then some national media, and some international media. Back in 1973, I had one witness who we interviewed who said, I was watching the TV in 1973, and they're talking about Charlie and Calvin on two different channels. He says one channel is taking it serious, the other channel is just trying to make fools out of them. So he said, there is no way I was going to step forward and open myself up to the possibility of them ridiculing me like they have done on there. But of course, times have changed now. Calvin was treated with respect. And so what it did in turn, it lured a few others out of the woodwork. And then we found some, like Darcy mentioned that Mr. and Mrs. Blair, they didn't step forward. And we found them. I'll explain how. Calvin was interviewed by a local journalist called Karen Nelson. And while she was interviewing him, she filmed him as well. So she made a little 5-minute mini documentary, So you read her article online, and embedded in it is this little video that she made. Somebody took that, put it on YouTube. So I'm reading the comments underneath it, and there were a lot. And there's one stuck out, and it said, my mum and dad were on the opposite side of the river that night. They too saw the UFO. And I thought, hellfire. Managed to contact this person. It was a young lady. And she says, my mum and dad were Maria and Jerry Blair, and they will speak to you. So I got their phone number, spoke to Maria and Jerry, passed that on to my colleague, Dr. Irina Scott in Ohio, who I've been working with. And she did the bulk of the interviewing with Jerry and Maria. So they hadn't stepped forward. Had I not noticed that little comment, we would probably have never got their testimony, which was very important because they claimed to have their own encounter. Maria also claims to have seen what was happening on the other side of the river with Charlie and Calvin. And they have two daughters. They're both grown up now. They told the daughters they saw this blue thing come down the river, but that was all. They didn't tell them anything else. Sadly, Jerry took seriously ill and eventually passed away. But we got his testimony. It was like a deathbed confession from Jerry, but it took several weeks, if not months. And so we got witnesses come forward, or we tracked them down one way or another. And it just kept getting more and more. And of course, Calvin felt vindicated. They were like, I told you so. Nobody would believe us, but look at all these people. They're not all making it up, So it's not any one thing. It's a combination of stuff.
I think one of the other interesting things, just in terms of witnesses, is, we showed in the documentary series too, but you've got all these police officers that witnessed it before and after that night. Sheriff Fred Diamond, who said he saw an object in the sky the night before. You have the priest that you tracked down. You have that lady that was in the car with him. Yeah. They saw this object fly over their car. Yeah. You have Larry Booth and all these original witnesses that came forward. I mean, something happened. Some people will argue nothing happened, but something was happening in the sky over the Pascagoula region of Mississippi that night, the night before, and nights after. There was like a UFO wave going on, and people were witnessing this stuff. Then you've got the abduction story. So it's like you've got a lot of context there that needs to be sort of unpacked.
Yeah, and as Darcy pointed out earlier on, one of the things we've managed to accumulate that we didn't know was available at the time, and we're still accumulating it now, I might add, is archive material. And for example, since we made the docu-series, a gentleman contacted me. He's a journalist, and he said, I think I got the first interview with Charles and Calvin. I said, okay, tell me your story. Now, he was pretty new to the journalism business, but he had somebody inside the sheriff's department, and they phoned him and told him what was happening with Charlie and Calvin. So he says, off I went with my camera, but by the time I got there, they'd gone. So he thought, right, I'll come back the following morning. So he went back the following morning. They said, no, Charlie and Calvin gone to be examined at the Singing River Hospital. So off he goes to the hospital. By the time he gets there, they've gone. They've been taken from there to Keesler Air Force Base to be checked for radiation. So he drives the 30-odd miles to Keesler Air Force Base, and he waits outside. And of course, Charlie and Calvin come out, and he asks them for an interview, and they say no. And they say, well, we don't want to show our faces. So what he did, he turned their backs to the camera, and he's in the middle of them, facing the camera with his microphone, and the cameras, and he interviewed them. And what is interesting, because this was 16mm film, this is not video or anything like that. Further on this video, this film that he has, was another interview he did with a local gentleman. He worked for the civil defense. He was their meteorologist. And he said, I got something on radar. So he interviews him in his little radar room, his little meteorological room. Then there's another interview with a local taxi driver who claimed this UFO landed in front of his car and these creatures got out. What he forgot to add was that his buddy was parked behind him. And when his buddy was interviewed, he said, there was nothing land. And it was that one was a hoax. So we have all this original, and nobody's ever seen the light of day. He digitized it for me, so I have a copy. He also had some original press releases from the time, in paper. So he sent me those as well. So we've been accumulating more, as Darcy pointed out. What is fascinating is the archival material, because it leads to other things. And we've got a ton of it. I've got boxes of it here, literally. And we knew none of this to start off with. For example, I got very friendly with Calvin Parker. Calvin had another encounter in 1993. I won't go into all the details, it'll take too long, but he had a friend now who knew a little bit about UFOs. And he said, Bud Hopkins is a specialist in this field, and he's speaking at a conference in Florida. So they got in the car and they drove to Florida. I think it took them 13 hours, unannounced. And the conference was in a hotel. Calvin wouldn't go in. His friend went in, found Bud, told him what was what. So Bud says, here's my room key. Tell him to meet me there. They went to the room. Hey, presto, Bud Hopkins put Calvin under hypnosis. And we have a copy of that tape. And we didn't know it even existed. We then found out that Charlie Hickson had been hypnotized twice by Bud Hopkins, several years apart. So we got those as well. And on you go. We never knew this stuff existed. So
I remember, I was in the process of making this docu-series, and Philip sent me that recording, and I was like, dude, I am so far gone in terms of already putting so much stuff in this. I don't think I can fit this in. We had the secret tape. We had an interview that Charlie Hickson had done very early on, talking about the whole incident and what happened to him before and after. And, I just felt like I can't do everything, but eventually, maybe I'll release it on YouTube or whatever with your consent, and just it enhance the experience for everybody so that they can see more of that archival and history of what happened.
Yeah. And what Darcy did use was some of the hypnosis of Calvin Parker that we had filmed. This was done in 2022, I think it was. But you can't put it all on because it's just too long. What is interesting about it, I don't know if people will notice when they do see it, is I asked the hypnotherapist to ask Calvin a couple of questions. We hired her to, first of all, watch Maria Blair under hypnosis. And it was done at Calvin's house. Now, this hypnotherapist knew nothing about the subject matter. We told her a time, a place, and a location. So she put Maria Blair under hypnosis. We then used the same lady, a few weeks later to put Calvin under hypnosis. And I had it filmed. I wanted to preserve it for posterity. So I give her a couple of questions. The first one was, when Calvin is sitting on that pier that night with his fishing rod, and his line in the water, just describe the environment in front of him. And he does. He says, there's the bridge, there's the shipyard, there's a little boat going up. He even told me the initials of the company on the boat. Right at the end of it, and if you don't listen carefully, you'll miss it. He says, oh, there's two figures on the other side of the river. Is that Maria and Jerry Blair? Don't know. But it's intriguing nonetheless. And we have that for posterity, of course.
For people to know, when did Calvin pass away again? It was like that final hypnosis was kind of recorded around 2022, but it was not long after that.
No, it's 2 years ago he passed away. It's 2 years ago. It's just gone 2 years. I spoke to Calvin a few days before he died. We knew he was dying. And his wife, Waynette, who'd been his fiance back in the day at the time, become very good friends. So she sent me a message saying, if you need to talk to him, the time is now. So I phoned them up. And he was still Calvin, even though he was, on his last legs. And I said, you're not allowed to die anyway. He says, why not? I said, because your wife hasn't given you permission. So, and he laughed, he laughed. And I'd like to think his last memories of me were made him laugh. And he was a great guy. Calvin was also the kind of guy that if he didn't want to speak about something, he wouldn't. There's no point pushing him or asking him 3 or 4 times. He just wouldn't. He wouldn't be rude or anything like that. He would just, I'm not talking about it. He would tell you in his own good time. For example, Calvin had a son. His son died. But it took him maybe 2 or 3 years before he told me, what had happened to his son and how he died. And if I'd have asked him earlier, he would just wouldn't have told me. But he was also a character outside of all this. And, we used to talk about some of the other things he did in his life. He was a bounty hunter at one point. Yeah. And he said,
like Dog the Bounty Hunter?
Like Dog the Bounty Hunter. He said, I went to get this guy one night, Philip, and he said, I took my baseball bat. It's a big mistake. I said, why? He said, well, this fella took the baseball bat off me, hit me with it. So he said, after that, I always took my gun. He said, they didn't argue with the gun. You know what I mean? And,
I always take a gun to a knife fight, right?
Yeah. And he told me, he said, I got hired, fired, and abducted in the same day. Because that was his first day at work in the shipyard. October 11th, 1973. Yeah. And so he had his own. For me, this sums the guy up. Calvin is dying of cancer, literally dying of cancer. His mum is in a nursing home not too far away. She's at the stage in her illness, she can't even identify him. But every Friday night, Calvin would take his guitar, go to the nursing home and sing songs for the patients there. And he's dying himself. That is the man we're talking about, And I can't compliment him any more than that. That kind of sums him up, what a kind of fella he was. He reminded me in a lot of instances like my own brother, who passed away a number of years ago, except my brother couldn't play the guitar or sing. And this will make you laugh. Calvin told, I got this story via the back channel. Calvin didn't tell me this. And he said to a colleague, don't tell Philip, he'll put it on Facebook.
That's true. You post a lot of stuff.
But I have 3 recordings of Calvin singing, and I've kept those, But what a fella, And but it is we started off, like I said, it was just Charlie and Calvin and what happened to them, with maybe a couple of witnesses way back then. It has grown out of all proportion since then, and continues to grow. I'll give you an example. Just this October now, it's just gone. It was the 52nd anniversary of the encounter. There was a post on a certain Facebook page, a lot of people making comments. There is 6 or 7 people on that Facebook page saying, I saw something that night. So the amount of witnesses that are still out there that haven't gone on the record or haven't been interviewed is God knows how many. There's a lot. And when we look at them all, you've got Charlie and Calvin on that pier, you've got others around them, and then you've got others around them, and it spreads out, and it spreads, and it's much bigger than perhaps people realize, much bigger than we ever realized. I only got hold of Calvin Parker to do an interview with him, and everything changed, Fascinating case. For me, it's the best there is.
Just to zoom out a little bit before we wrap it up with a more general question, as technology and society continue to evolve over time, have you seen a change in the rate and the types of cases that are reported and investigated today versus in decades past?
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of years back, maybe a bit longer, was on a podcast, and somebody said to me, where have all the Space Brothers gone? And I thought, hellfire, And if you look, if you can take a look at the UFO phenomena since 1947, we'll start there for obvious reasons, and you can see how it has evolved. We had the Space Brothers in the 1950s. The first abduction comes in 1961, the one that hits the headlines anyway, Betty and Barney Hill. And you also see the way that UFO researchers worked. They didn't want to believe in the Space Brothers because they wanted the subject to be treated seriously. Similarly, they didn't want to admit that there were abduction experiences because, again, they wanted the subject to be taken seriously. The phrase UFO was invented by the US Air Force to give it a more serious sound. What does that remind you of today?
UAP.
Exactly. It's the same story, different person, same thing. So you see it evolve over the years as well, but some things don't change. When it comes to disclosure, back in the 50s, you had Don Keogh, Major Don Keogh. It's coming. The Air Force or whoever's going to tell us everything told us nothing. And you have the same today. I remember, was it in the 80s? You had Operation Right to Know, with their banners outside the White House. Oh, we're going to force them, citizens against UFO secrecy. We're going to sue the government. They're going to tell us everything. Yeah, well, I'm still waiting for the check, because it hasn't happened and it won't happen. And now it's called disclosure, In 10 years' time, it will be called something else.
Fair enough. I mean, today you've got Arrow. Back then you had Project Blue Book. I mean, a lot of people say the same stuff's happening over at Arrow. It's a lot of cover up and catch-all sort of activity and then debunk. But what do you think about 3i Atlas? Do you think there's a alien spacecraft that's just entered our solar system from deep space and possibly is, carrying the Draco reptilians and they're going to come say hi soon?
No, not at all. It is what it is. It's a comet. And, you can make out of it any fantastic story you want. I've seen comets. I saw Comet Hale-Bopp, which was beautiful, by the way. I saw Halley's Comet, which was a bit disappointing. That looked a bit like a snowball. And this is just another comet. They are poorly understood, simply because they don't come that close that very often. So trying to figure out what they are. And so the science behind them may change, because we learn something new about them. It's like astronomy in general, Darcy. You know, today we know that the visible universe, emphasis on the word visible, is 48 billion light years across. There's 2 trillion galaxies. And in those galaxies, I don't know what the next number up is, but there's countless stars and planets. And so our knowledge of the universe has grown en masse, and our knowledge of things like this comet and other things will grow as well as we learn more about them. It's not that long ago, if you think about it, that would never, ever admit that there were exoplanets. Now they do. And they tell you how they can tell there's an exoplanet. They can't see it. It's too far away. But they'll explain the science behind it, and they give them names or numbers usually. And it's one of the fascinating things about astronomy when we go a little bit closer to home. And that is there, or was there, life on Mars? If you go back to when Bill Clinton was the president, he held a press conference where they got a meteorite from Mars. They found it in one of the polar regions. And in it, they had a microfossil. So it's fossilized bacteria. And Clinton went as close as anyone's ever been of saying we have life elsewhere in even of us. Even if it's only bacterial life, it's life. It's where life began. So I think rather than looking at some goddamn comet, the answer might be in our own backyard. And some people claim that we are the Martians, that these comets hit the Earth and the bacteria flourished as Mars was on its way out.
Panspermia, right?
Yeah, well, what we see on Mars now, undoubtedly, and it's admitted by the majority of astronomers, there was water on Mars. You can see all the features, the riverbeds, all dried up. And we know on Earth, where there's water, there's life. Physics normally is the same wherever it goes. So why wasn't there life on Mars? So I think we should be looking there and then take the next step before we're looking at some damn comet that we can't do anything about. And you can put all the fantastic ideas you want about it, but it's still a comet.
Yeah, there's enough questions to answer much closer to home, for sure.
Absolutely.
We're just about out of time, but I wanted to leave you with one final question. I'll start with Darcy. After viewers watch your entire docu-series, Pascagoula 73, which, by the way, they can do with the links in the description, what is the takeaway that you hope that viewers get from it?
Not to, completely write off some of these old stories, to, give them a chance in your mind that maybe people are being visited by a non-human intelligence, right? Or something that is anomalous. And I think with the UFO subject, UAP now, there's tons of evidence that there's anomalous phenomenon around our planet. And people should just keep an open mind to that, but also remember, because we covered in the series, there are hoaxes, there are charlatans, and pure spectacle and entertainment that's thrown in there. And I think, Phil even brought up the Space Brothers. I believe that gave birth to the Galactic Federation. Am I right? Like that kind of, it evolved from the 1950s to now, to people saying that there's this like Star Trek group of extraterrestrials that are watching us and in league with us in space missions. So it's interesting. There's all kinds of stuff.
What do you think people should take away from learning more about the Pascagoula case, Philip?
Well, for me, it's the ultimate case that we have so far. There is nothing else like it. There are fascinating encounters and experiences and sightings, as Darcy has pointed out, and rightfully so. But when you look at everything we've done on the Pascagoula case, myself, my colleague, Dr. Ariana Scott, there isn't another one like it. Betty and Barney Hill, they didn't talk about it for years. That information only came out under hypnosis. Travis Walt, again, there's no independent eyewitnesses, there's nothing. But we have all that and more in the Pascagoula case. And it's all there for everyone to see. It's not hidden by any government. It's here. We've either published it or we've put it on Darcy's documentary. It's all there. Everything we've got is available. Even online that are some of the recordings. So it's all there. You can go and make up your own mind and think Mantle's off his head. Send that Yorkshireman back home across the Atlantic, and that's fine. And I don't have an answer for it. Simple as that.
Well, there's a great many things that we don't have answers for, but it shouldn't stop us from asking the questions. And I think that's what you're doing with your work, Darcy, and Philip, same to you. So thank you both for that. And I should have mentioned this at the top of the episode, but the Unveiled podcast is a show that I host. We publish episodes every other Friday. So please check that out if you haven't already. One final interesting comment from Sir Gasbo once again. 3i Atlas has raised the possibility of alien life with the sleeping masses, and it has created interest in the skies for a new audience. And I think that's noteworthy and right on point, because more people should be taking an interest in this stuff. We've had congressional hearings now 3 years in a row, and the UAP situation still doesn't get the mainstream press that I think it deserves. But if we continue having conversations like this, more and more people should get interested. So thank you guys both for joining me today. It was great to speak with you. Viewers, please do check out Darcy's work. The links to his films are in the description. And we should be coming back with more of his stuff, and hopefully more Q&As and other interesting discussions to follow. So thank you, everybody, for joining us, and we'll see you guys next time.